I would say, last stretch of our book. And we have covered a lot of things so far. And now we're at the place where we're talking about what this world is. And, we're given ideas that it is nothing but the self itself. So before, I guess, we begin, does anyone have any thoughts about what we have covered so far? I have a feeling that this may be the last class. We have about 10 verses left, so let's see how we do. But this is sort of kind of covering the last, I would say, steps that are remaining, which are continuing to look at the world and see what it is, and notice that it's nothing but consciousness itself appearing as the diverse objects that we see. Another practice that is kind of useful now is to kind of just pay attention to whenever we have thoughts that are coming up, or whenever we want to do things, or whenever we feel a certain way or an emotion, notice that this is all the past coming up and fructifying in the present moment, and we're just going through with whatever is coming up. So we are always experiencing the past, you could say. The thoughts that are coming up are essentially the past. The emotions that are coming up are essentially built up and conditioned by the past impressions. So everything that's going on right now is the past. So the sense of ownership that we can kind of get entangled with and say that these are my emotions, or why am I feeling this way, you can kind of create a distance by just taking a position of saying, oh, this is just the past coming up. It is not my thought. It is not my emotion. It is not my desire. You may want to go through with the desire. You may want to go through with the emotion, but having that awareness and knowledge that, oh, this is just the past, creates this sense of, I would say, lubrication in the way we flow with that emotion or energy or the thought, because we don't get entangled, because we know that this is nothing but the past. So that's, so start to say, or start to look at the world whenever you sort of, walking outside or just, doing any activity, and just like taking a position of like, I do nothing, I own nothing, and see if that kind of changes the flavor of your experience. Good. So on that note, let us start our class and go into the book. I'm going to share my screen. So I believe we were on verse, actually, I believe we were on verse 58. Correct me if I'm wrong. We finished 57 last week, and we're going to start 58 today.
That's right.
All right, let's get into it. Akhandananda rupasya tasyananda lavakshita brahmadhyastara tam yena bhavantyānanda nokhilaha. So deities like Brahma and others taste only a particle of the unlimited bliss of Brahman and proportionately enjoy their share of the particle. So here we're kind of given a sort of, I would say, explanation of, what, religious and I would say more of like devotional practices are, especially in Hindu culture. So this is specifically talking about the Hindu deity. So Brahma is a deity who is like one of the, main, I would say, gods or powers that are worshipped in Hindu culture. And they're just talking about, people, even that god or even that person only tastes a particle of what is available to us, because whatever people sort of, or gods or like others like experience through the physical is always going to be a tiny aspect of Brahman, which is like infinite consciousness. So whatever worldly pleasure that we all experience, that's only a particle or a small slice of what is actually available. So, devotional practices and all of that in the beginning may be helpful, but it's only like a first step. Like we want to give up anything that is sort of a physical means. So, if you're doing, yoga asana, that's great. Even if you're doing meditation, after a while, there's a moment that comes where, nothing is needed to be done, you could say, in many ways, because you have let go of all the tools that you needed, because tools are only a means to get to a certain place. Once you've gotten there, then you can kind of let go of the tool and use something else. And then finally you get to a place where nothing is really needed, because this unlimited bliss of Brahman is always available. Because once we see that this background or this context of this awareness that we have, and so much so, not even so much that we have, that we are, then we can always go to that place and enjoy that, the bliss that comes out of that place. Because when the mind is quiet, we feel blissful. When the mind is activated and it's noisy and we want something or we don't want something, when it's agitated, the bliss is not available. That's basically it. That's the entirety of yoga can be summed up into, mind is needed for suffering. When the mind quietens down, the bliss is available. And we all are seeking the mind to be quiet. So, some people go out seeking adventure, skydiving or bungee jumping. Some people like to spend time with their friends and family. Some people like to take up hobbies, but all of those different activities is just quieting the mind. And when the mind is quiet, this bliss comes out. And then because of ignorance, we think it's the activity, it's the friends, it's the bungee jumping, though that's where happiness is. But actually the happiness has always been here, and it's just covered by the mind, and is, peeps out when the mind quietens down. So if we just understand this, and then go through the world with this understanding, there will come a point when this unlimited Brahman can be seen. So any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the next one. Tyadyuktam akhilam vastu vyavaharastadantah tasmat sarvatagam brahma shire sarpi rivakhile. So all objects are pervaded by Brahman. Also, all actions are possible because of Brahman alone. Therefore, Brahman permeates everything as butter permeates milk. Okay, so now we're given what we have been kind of talking about throughout this course or this book, which is that first there is awareness. After awareness, then everything else proceeds. So the basis of our entire experience is that we are aware. Only once we are aware can we do actions. Just like the example of the mirror and there's objects in the mirror. So the objects in the mirror cannot exist if there was no mirror. If you're just looking at the mirror, you can only see a reflection if there is a reflecting surface. There's no reflection if there is no reflecting surface. If you remove the reflecting surface, there's no reflection, right? So you can see stuff in the mirror, but if I ask you to see stuff on a rock, there's no reflection in there because the rock does not reflect. In the same way, Brahman is the mirror, you could say, in a way, and all the objects are reflected in Brahman. So you see the world because you are aware. If this awareness is not there, then this world isn't there subjectively. We have to always look at this from a subjective viewpoint. So all objects are pervaded by Brahman. So where can you go in this universe where you're not aware? Is there such a place? There isn't. So awareness is pervaded. There's no place where awareness isn't. And in this awareness, we have desires, we have thoughts, so first we have what is known as, we look at something and we have a thought that, oh, this is a chocolate. And then because of previous experiences of like, oh, I like chocolate, I may have had chocolate, or I want to eat this thing, I've never seen this before, another thought comes up. And because of that another thought, there may be a motivation to do something, and there may be a desire. So a thought becomes a desire. And when desire is strong enough, desire becomes an action. So these are all sort of cause and effect things that keep happening and that lead to action, right? So action is always, the basis of an action is being aware of something. If you're not aware of something, then there's not going to be any action. And sometimes we do unconscious action, but we're aware of something else. So in that standpoint, we're still doing something out of some sense of awareness, but we're unconscious about the true intention, and we kind of do it out of some other intention. So for example, getting drunk all the time, like we're taking an action, but we are unconscious about the fact that what it's doing to us. Or we may want to be suppressing some sort of thought or emotion, and we're kind of going and becoming numb, you could say. But that's the unconscious aspect. But still, there is a motivation, even in the case when I want to get numb, right? Which is, I think that's going to make me happy. So everything has a basis. And this basis is Brahman, which is awareness. So first we have to be aware, and then out of that comes action. So the example here is, just as butter permeates milk. So, there's milk, and within milk there's butter. This is just an old example, so take it in the context that it's written. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the next one. Anan vasthula harava swamaiti gharma vyayam arupa gunavarnakyam tad brahmet yavadharayet. So realize that to be Brahman, which is neither subtle nor gross, neither short nor long, without birth or change, without form, attributes, color, and name. So this is another meditation verse. So what is Brahman? It's not like you're going to see Brahman as an object. You're not going to see it as an external experience. It is the subject. It's like trying to see your own eyes. Right? You can never see your own eyes. You can see a reflection, you can see a picture, but you'll never see your own eyes. But yet you can see. You never doubt that we can see. In the same way, we never doubt that we are aware that I am, I exist. But what I doubt is, what do I look like? What is my nature? Because all of those things cannot be perceived. You can perceive other things. I can see the color of other objects, but I can't see the color of my own eye. The same way, I cannot see I cannot say whether I am big or small, whether I'm short or long. You could say even without birth or change. So there comes a time when you realize that I am deathless. I do not die. Something dies, something changes, but I remains the same. So you can say the body takes birth and the body decays and the body dies. But I, which is this awareness, which is standing apart from both the mind, the body, it just remains. So this I is without form. So like if you close your eyes and if you try to, introvert your attention and you try to notice this I, does it have a form? Does this awareness have a form? Does it have any shape? And you start to, if your mind gets quiet enough and if you can sense this sort of vast space of awareness, you will start to notice that no, it actually doesn't have any form. And don't take this on faith and don't take this on belief. You have to all prove this in our own sort of experience, in our own meditation, or even when you're just out there in the world. So even when the world is when you're in the world and you're looking at stuff, even then, if we can stay a little still and quieten our mind, you'll notice that the sense of awareness kind of expands. Like when we're kind of caught up with the world and when you're kind of entangled with something that's going on, the sense of identity contracts, where, I can only see what is in front of me, and, who I am and what I want, and my identity is very strong and concrete. But there's also moments when I'm out in nature and like this, things are pretty quiet, and where the sense of identity kind of expands and almost, you could say, disappears, where I feel like I'm not just my limited body, like that there's something like larger than just this body. And in those moments, what's happening is just the mind is, the same things happening to the mind. The mind is quietening down, and I can start to perceive this background, this context of all of my experience a little bit more. And in those moments, we can get a sense that, oh, this thing is pretty big. It has no shape. And because it's big, it has no boundaries. So you could say something, is limited when it has a certain shape. But if something doesn't have shape, it doesn't end anywhere. So, this sense of awareness can extend infinitely in all directions. So no shape and no attributes is because, attributes is something you could say of a physical object. The eye has really no attributes. It's like asking, what is the color of your own eye? Somebody else can tell you, but from your own subjective experience, you can never know the color of your own eye. So in the same way, the eye is the basis of all experience. So form, color, size, all of that can never be attributed to the eye. Everything else that it perceives can have color and shape and form, but the eye can never have it. So don't believe me, see this if this is true or not, and prove this in your own meditation. So this is a meditation verse. So when you're meditating, when you are kind of deep in meditation, keep this book around. And when you're feeling quiet, just open your eyes and just read this and see if this is true or not. That's kind of how we use these verses. And, it has no color and name, and I think we've covered that. Any thoughts about this one?
So a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm trying not to characterize it in meditation, sometimes I get the sense of, I want to say the word energy or force.
Mm-hmm.
Could you comment on that, if it really doesn't exist, or
yeah? So
how do you give a word to something that doesn't have any attributes?
Yeah. So energy and force, we actually kind of may have touched upon it at some point, where we said that, there's 5 kinds of koshas or 5 bodies. So we said we had a physical body, we had a mental body, and then we have an energy body, and then we have an intellectual body, and then we have a bliss. Actually, I wouldn't call it body. These were sheets. So the physical sheet, the mental sheet, the energy sheet, the intellectual sheet, and the bliss sheet. And these are all sort of, I would say, aspects of our experience that we can pay attention to. So a lot of people, are trapped in just paying attention to the physical body. And their entire life, they are just focused on the physical body, and, which is fine, but they never get to experience subtler aspects of themselves. So people who are like body conscious and always trying to look good and like living in that world, live in that place. And you can see people around, like, their entire attention is there. Some people are emotional in nature. Their entire attention is focused on how I'm feeling. And that's the mental sheet. So like, these are all called sheets because they grab our attention, and because they grab our attention, we don't have an opportunity to pay attention to the self, to this I, which is hiding, it's like an onion, right? Like all the way in the center, and you're paying attention to these like shells. And then in the third layer is the energy sheet. A lot of people just keep paying attention to how they're feeling energetically. And, sometimes feeling high energy feels really good because, it's better than feeling low energy, right? So when we feel high energy, we are seeking those energy states again. And like, that's kind of the pursuit, which is, which is a good place to be because you're not in the physical and you're not focusing on the mental. And what happens is like when those two things drop away, then the energy, we can see that, oh, this energy stuff is happening all the time. We are conscious beings, right? And the body is complex and there's stuff going on. And as our mind starts to get sharper, we can start to pay attention to more subtler things. So now we can pay attention to there's like energetic stuff that's going on. And then, there's this intellectual stuff, which is more of like noticing these tiny forces of thought that are constantly happening all the time. Like as our mind gets subtler, we can start to pay more and more subtle things. And finally, we get to a place where we can start to pay attention to the bliss of the self that is happening constantly because it's available all the time. But even we have to let go of even that. So these are essentially parts of us that we have to let go of. And by let go, I mean, not pay too much attention to it. It's great that it's happening because these are all happening all the time. The physical body is available for perception pretty much all the time. The emotional body is available for perception all the time, but we can choose to pay attention to it or not. So I would say like it's great that you're able to feel these energetic forces. I would say don't pay too much attention or see that it's happening, but don't try to go into causation hunting is the word we use, where we try to see what is going on, why is it happening, because that's not useful because it can just grab at you for years. But it's I would say a positive step where you can start to sense energetic movement in the body. And like in some traditions, that is the way out, because any aspect of our nature can be used as a tool to reach the self. So, right now we are using this is an intellectual, you're using the intellect to get out. Some people use the physical to get out. Some people can use the emotional to get out. So like devotional practices, for example, it's all about emotional. So it's all about getting into mind, states of ecstasy, emotional ecstasy, you could say, of joy, of happiness. And to somebody, it can look like this person is a madman or a madwoman. But what's happening is like they are using the emotional aspect to get to a state where their mind stops. And the same way with energetic work too. So if you're using energetic work, you can get to a place where the mind stops using energy to do that. In this work, we are not focusing so much on the physical, the emotional, and energetic specifically. But in the end, we all kind of do a combination of yoga. We kind of use all the things that are available, and they all sort of have a force and effect in how we kind of who we become and like what practices that grab at us. So I would say don't worry about it. If it's happening, it's great, but just keep on keeping on. Does that help?
Yep, thanks.
Cool. Any other thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the next one. Yad bhasa bhasate kardi bhasyair yuktau na bhasyate yena sarva midam bhati tad brahmet yavadharayet. So that by the light of which the luminous orbs like the sun and the moon are illuminated, but that which is not illumined by their light, realize that to be Brahman. So again, we're kind of given these pointers and I would say poetry, you could say, that can, that uses language to talk about what the self is. It's giving us pointers to say, just like how the sun shines, and you can see orbs of light around the sun. But the sun itself doesn't need any light, right? It is the light comes out of the sun. So like if somebody were to say, oh, I can't see the sun, you don't need, I would say, like a flashlight or a torch to like point at the sun and say, oh, that's the sun. Because, the sun is by which light is there. In the same way, you don't need another awareness to point at your awareness and say, that is awareness, because you are awareness itself. So you don't need another light in the same way. You don't need to shine a light towards your own self. You are light. It is the light that's revealing stuff in our experience, in the subjective experience. Always remember, this is a subjective endeavor. So, subjectively, my experience is full of stuff. Like I have, a very diverse world. Like right now, it's the daytime, so lots of like things that I can see. But what is it that is sort of illumining this world for me? What is this light? Right now you can say, oh, it's the sun's light that is, making stuff aware. But no, that's not true, right? Even in the dark, I can still be aware of things. So what is this light, you could say? This light of awareness that is illuminating stuff for me. I can hear sounds, I can hear, I can see stuff, I can touch things, like all of my senses. They're all, the context in which they reveal things for me. What is this light? So that is Brahman. That's kind of how we want to keep bringing our mind back, or I would say not even our mind, but our attentive faculty of our mind, keep bringing that back to this self. The mind will always want to look at stuff, but keep bringing it back and say, oh, this is Brahman, this light that's shining and revealing things. This is Brahman. So keep using this and bringing our attention back. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the next one. Swayam antar bahir vyapya bhasayanna khilam jagat brahma prakashate vahni prataptaya sapandavat. So pervading the entire universe within and without, the supreme Brahman shines by itself like the fire that permeates a red hot iron ball and glows by itself. Okay, so here we're given like another example. So Brahman, and we can look at this from a subjective viewpoint. So like my subjective viewpoint, I have a within and I have a without. Right now I can say, as a person who considers that I am just this limited body, anything outside of this body is not me. So that is without, without. Anything within this body and including this body is me, right? That's kind of how we think of this world. So anything inside is me and there's an outside. So in and out. But this Brahman and the sense of awareness pervades both within and without. So I can be aware of stuff that's going on in my body. So I'm feeling, the energy flowing in my body. I'm feeling the blood flowing. I can feel sensations. I can think of thoughts. All of that's happening within, right? From a subjective standpoint. And without, I can see stuff that's happening outside. I can see things moving. I can see color. I can see all of those things. So this sort of awareness is pervaded everywhere. And the Supreme Brahman in this verse says that shines by itself. So do I need anything else for me to be aware? Do I have to wake up in the morning and, just like how I take a shower to feel clean, do I have to do any practice to start becoming aware? No, right? Like I wake up and I'm aware. I go to sleep and I'm still aware, actually. I'm aware of a dream world. And when I'm not dreaming, I'm actually still aware of nothing, because when I wake up, I'm like, oh, I didn't have any dreams last night. The only way I can say that I didn't have any dreams last night is the fact that I was aware that there were no dreams when I was sleeping. So all the time, there is this awareness. I don't have to do anything. So I'm aware by itself. And the word we use is Swayambhu, which is like this self-luminous property of the self. So the example here is, like the fire that permeates the red hot iron ball and glows by itself. So, when you look at the body and you say, oh, it's the body that's, moving. People who are like, you see people moving around or living things moving around, and you're like, oh, they are, moving around. But, just like how a red hot iron ball, takes the heat from the fire and starts to glow. And because of the heat of the fire, it's hot. It's not hot by itself, right? If you just if you just keep a you just keep an iron ball out in the side, it's not going to be hot. but it becomes hot because of the fire, and it absorbs the heat of the fire. Just in the same way, this world is moving and diverse, not by itself. So by matter just by itself is inert. It's because of the touch of Brahman, you could say, and because of the fire of Brahman, that it, it becomes alive because of like this sort of the heat and the power of Brahman. And it glows by itself. So it appears that, oh, this world is diverse by itself, but behind, just like, there's the fire that's keeping this iron ball hot and red in color, in the same way, behind this world, there's Brahman, the sense of awareness or consciousness. The potentiality of it is keeping this world moving and changing. There will come a time, according to this work, where right now it's expanding, where there will come a time when it all contracts and it'll go into, this destruction, and it'll go back into potentiality, where there's nothing but this consciousness. Out of this consciousness arises this world and diversity, and then into the same consciousness, it'll go back. And we can prove this to you by looking at your own sort of thoughts, right? So like if right now I ask you to think of what you ate for dinner last night. So out of nothing, you can have a sort of, you can go back to that experience of eating food last night. And out of this unconscious or out of this context comes this thought. It exists for a while and it goes back. Look at this world. Any object that exists right now has come out of nothing, and it is going to go back into nothing. So right now I have a cup which is been built by somebody or made by somebody. It didn't exist before it was made. It came out of nothing. It may have come out of some raw materials, and then it became this cup. And then once it breaks and once it degrades and becomes sand again or clay again, it will go back. So this is the law of this universe. So you can say that there are certain laws that pervade this entire universe, and the law of creation and sustenance and destruction is a law, and this law cannot be only limited to some things. They are sort of recursive and extend beyond and within and without, you could say. So that's what this verse is talking about. Any thoughts about this?
What was the word you used for the self-luminous property of?
Yeah, so the word is Swayambhu. So the first word, the first six characters of this verse. So the word is Swayam. So that means self, by itself. And Bhu is this sort of luminous aspect, light, you could say. So Swayambhu is the word we use for self-luminous, BHU.
Thanks.
Cool. All right, let's do the next one. Jagat vilakshanam brahma brahmano anyana kinchana brahmanya bhati chin che mithya yatha maru marichika. So Brahman is other than the universe. There exists nothing whatsoever that is not Brahman. If any object other than Brahman appears to exist, it is unreal, like the mirage. So this is kind of like a contradictory verse, right? You could look at this and you're like, Brahman is other than the universe, but then there's also nothing whatsoever that is not Brahman. So that means the universe is not true, right? Like that's kind of what this is alluding to. And that's kind of very hard for most of us to grasp, because for our entire life, we've been told that what you see is real. But this is essentially saying the opposite. It's saying that what you see is unreal. And unreal from the standpoint of it not being the truth. The truth cannot be in what we see, because what we see is always limited and is always temporary. So if you're looking for truth, you're not going to find it in this world. That's a fact. And by truth here, we mean something that is permanent, right? We don't want to get like all caught up with like what's the word, philosophies and like essentially like mind games. We want to see what is true from a direct experiential standpoint. Like I can say, oh, there is something which is true all the time. Philosophically, I can create like ideas which are true all the time, but we don't care about those things because those are ideas. We want to see in my own experience, is there anything that is true, which I cannot deny? And that's the sort of search that we are after, or that we are looking for in this work. And I would say in all of spirituality, which is like, I want to find something within my own experience, which is true all the time, which I cannot deny. That is truth. Anything else which comes and goes, is there for a while, cannot be true. So in this, so anything that's happening, it can be useful, you can say, right? Like I can say some things are definitely useful in this world for us to function. So like energy, for example, if we were talking about this earlier, is definitely useful. Like it's good to have high energy rather than low energy, but it is not the truth, because energy comes and goes. Anything that comes and goes cannot be true. So the question is, what does not come and go? What remains still? What remains, true all the time? What is infinite, you could say? That is the truth. So Brahman is other than the universe, is that this universe cannot be like the universe as we perceive it, as separate from me, out there. That is not Brahman. And then there's the next verse which says there exists, the next part of it which says there exists nothing whatsoever that is not Brahman, which means that whatever I'm seeing is actually Brahman too. Because this universe that we think is separate from me, is out there, is not true. There's no universe apart from Brahman. Just like there was no reflection apart from the mirror, there's no universe apart from Brahman. So you could say the reflection is the mirror, right? It's just that the mirror has undergone, you couldn't even say it's undergone a change, because the reflective surface actually doesn't change at all. It's just that images appear in the mirror. In the same way, universe appears in Brahman. It looks like it's changing, different things make it appear different. It's day now, it's going to become night. There's people like outside, there's no people sometimes. So it's appearing different, but the background and the surface of the mirror does not undergo any change. Same way, Brahman does not undergo any change. If we think that there is an object other than Brahman, we are deluded. And that's the sort of takeaway of this verse. So like whenever you see anything, what you're seeing is just consciousness. You're seeing consciousness appear as whatever you're seeing. It's appearing as a person. It's appearing as a physical object. It's appearing as an emotion. It's appearing as a thought. If you think it is anything real in that sense, it's, you're deluded. So just like saying the mirror, when you're driving, on a hot day on a highway, and in the distance we see, oh, there's a pipe burst, or like, the road is flooded, and you're seeing this water everywhere. And you kind of have all these thoughts about, oh, what am I going to do? I need to find a different road. I need to get out and take an exit. But then as you keep driving, the water keeps receding. And then you realize that, oh, it's a mirage. It's not water, it's not a pipe burst. That doesn't mean that the mirage disappears. We still perceive the mirage. We still see, oh, there's what looks like water, but our knowledge has now changed. And, oh, it's actually a mirage. So thoughts about like wanting to take an exit and maybe driving slowly over the water, all of those things are gone, right? Because now the knowledge is that, oh, it's a mirage. Don't worry about it. The same sort of thing happens here, which is we continue to see the world. We continue to perceive it, but our understanding of what it is fundamentally transformed. And that's the transformation happens. Who changes or what changes? It's not like the world changes. It's just that my mind changes and my mind is transformed. The mind realizes its own like unreality. The mind realizes that it had a bunch of ideas that it subscribed to, and they're not really true. After my own, after the mind's own examination, after the mind's own, I would say, experiences, that's when this transformation happens. It loses the hold over certain ideas that kept things in place. And once the mind lets loose, the floodgates of Brahman open, you could say. Any thoughts about this? Okay, let's do the next one. Drishyate shruyate yadya brahmano anyana tadbhavet tatvat jnanacha tad brahma satchidananda advayam. So all that is perceived or heard is Brahman and nothing else. Gaining the knowledge of the reality, one sees the universe as the non-dual Brahman, which is existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute. Cool. So, remember the first part of the book was answering the first question, who am I? The second part of the book, or I would say the last 25%, is answering the second question, which is, what is this world? And whatever we are experiencing, our experience is nothing but Brahman. And so now we have to start to keep looking at the world and seeing it for what it is. It is nothing but consciousness. So whatever information that's coming in that is being, revealed to us by our senses. So like I'm seeing stuff, or I'm hearing stuff, or I'm touching things. What the mind is going to want to do is it's going to try to want to, identify it, and then identify it from the sense of my limited identity, which is like, what is my relationship to it? Is it mine or is it not mine? Do I like it or do I not like it? But instead, we're going to let all of that information pass through, which is, I'm not going to be identified with it. I'm just going to see it for what it is. If it's a car, I will just be like, it's a car. If it's an emotion, I'm just going to be like, it's emotion. I'm not going to create stories. And I'm going to say, okay, there's nothing but Brahman appearing as, let's say I'm feeling angry right now. You're just like, oh, anger is there. That's it. But it's all Brahman. And what this is doing is it's essentially, we can see that even while we are experiencing this world, this consciousness or the sense of awareness is present all the time. So, there's this other beautiful book called Tripura Rahasya, which is, you could say it's like a feminist book in this work. It's, the main character is a woman who is self-realized, and she's trying to teach this knowledge to her husband. And the husband is a king, and he's kind of like a bro, and he doesn't really understand any of it. And he's all about, enjoying the world because, of course, he's a king. He has access to a lot of resources and has like the best things available. And, and she's a really beautiful and attractive woman. And, he's like madly in love with her and like, always like looking for physical intimacy, but she's like kind of aloof in many ways because she's, blissed out most of the time. And he notices that she doesn't really care to want to enjoy anything like what he loves doing, like, doing fancy dinners or like going and, doing all these things that he does. And, but he notices that she has something special, like she's always, blissed out, you could say. And then he starts asking, and then that's the context of the book. And she starts having a conversation with him, and she leads him to, realizing that, that whatever he has valued so far has never really given him lasting joy. So he comes to his own sort of understanding of like, okay, there is something within me that is blissful. And he goes through the process of meditation. And then finally, in one part of the book, he comes to this place where he's blissed out. Like he can close his eyes and he starts experiencing, the bliss of the self. But when he opens his eyes, he doesn't want to engage with the world. And then he closes his eyes, then he's like pretty blissed out. And he's sort of isolated himself from, his subjects, and he's living in this, this place which is far away. And then his wife comes to visit him. And he's like in meditation, and like she wakes him up or like brings him out of it. And then he opens his eyes, like almost drunk from the bliss. And he's like, I want to go back. And then she like wakes him up again and saying, no, you gotta come out and like, walk outside. But he's like, how can you want to do all of that stuff if you know the bliss of this place? And then her reply to that is, how can this be perfect? Or how can this be what you're seeking if it can be achieved by just closing your eyes, and it can be lost by just opening your eyes? Like, it cannot be perfect. So what this, and he's like, and she's like, though you still have a lot of work to do. So, a lot of people stop their work by getting to this place, which is, I'm feeling great when I close my eyes and I meditate and I'm blissed out. But the moment I come out in this world, I'm, all caught up again. So that just means that, we haven't dealt with the second part, which is I am not perceiving the world to be consciousness as well. I have clearly understood who I am. And because I know who I am, I can go to that place where the world isn't there. And when the world isn't there, it's pretty blissful. But then when the world comes back, I'm all caught up again. So the next step is to, kind of deal with the world. So like walk in the world and notice that this background and the self is also still available. And keep sort of perceiving the world as Brahman. And once that happens, you will realize that even the world, even the universe has this existence, consciousness, bliss in the background. So keep at it, keep on keeping on, even after your meditation sessions become very blissful. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the next one. Sarvagam Satchidanatmanam Jnana Chakshu Nirikshite Ajnana Chakshu Nekshikta Bhasavantam Bhanumandavad. Though Atman is of the nature of pure consciousness and ever present everywhere, yet it can only be perceived by the eye of wisdom. Just as the blind do not see the resplendent sun, so too, one whose vision is obscured by ignorance does not see the self. So now we're kind of giving, like we are reaching the end of the book. So we're given the summary and like the most important sort of like aspects of this, or the tools or the reasons, and maybe like a refresher of what we have done so far. And here we are saying like, why do we not see it? If Atman is everywhere, if this entire world is Brahman, if this universe isn't true, or it isn't separate from me, why do I feel that it's separate from me? And the answer is that because, the mind is covered. We learned about the fact that the mind is needed for misery, and the mind is not needed for joy, because joy is nothing but the mind like thinned out a little bit, you could say. So in the same way, when the mind is very active, my entire attention is on the stuff. So on what my mind is producing. So it could be thoughts, it could be emotions, all of that is coming up, and my entire attention is on those things, because of which I cannot perceive the subject, which is the self. The senses have been made with outgoing tendencies. So I'm always paying attention to the external things, and I can do this for lifetimes when I'm just paying attention to stuff. Very, I would say, fortunate and lucky that we come in contact with something or some experience where we can turn our attention inwards and say, oh, this place is where the bliss is. All the time I was thinking the bliss is out there, but the bliss is actually like, there may be some experience that may happen that will lead us to kind of starting to turn inwards. That's the beginning of spirituality, and that's the beginning of religion, you could say, in many ways. And so so entire work of yoga is reduction of the mind, you could say. Or you can even say dissolution of the mind. That's the entire work of yoga, which is trying to get to a place where I can experience the self without the influence of the mind. The self is, I'm experiencing the self all the time. Right now, are you you? Do you exist? Like, are you aware? And, most of our answers is yes, I am. I exist, I'm aware, I know. So we're experiencing the self right now. But on this experience of the self, this world is kind of on it, right? So the universe is also available for perception. I'm experiencing the self, yes, but it's a tiny aspect of my experience because I can see things, I can hear stuff. So my attention is kind of broken because it cannot pay attention to the self because there's too many other things. So what is the solution? Get all of the other stuff out. Remove that from my experience for a moment so that only the self is available for perception. So that's the work that we go through of yoga. Not paying attention to the world, not paying attention to emotions, not paying attention to thoughts, not paying attention to energy, not paying attention to, intellect, like, subtle thoughts, all of that. So like finally single pointed attention on where is it that this experience is coming from. And finally, what's going to happen? Everything dissolves and the self is the only thing that's available for perception. So I will see I is the subject, I is the object, and the experience is also I. So all three become one non-dual experience. And in this moment, you will clearly see who you are and what is the nature of the self. It's not going to be, you're not going to need a book. You're not going to have to remember the Sanskrit words. All of that will become meaningless because, all of those are tools to get you to this point. So once we get there, let go of all Vedanta, let go of all of like whatever you were using in the past. All of those things will seem laughable. But then you will have a direct taste of the I. And until that happens, there will still be some doubts. And if we have doubts about stuff, it means that we have not completely seen the I. So keep on doing this work until it's not like, all your questions would be answered. That's kind of not how this works. What would happen is your doubts would disappear because the I you're going to have an experiential experience of the I. And the example here is like, just like the blind person cannot see the sun, no matter how many times you tell the person, hey, there's a sun, you cannot see, that person can never see the sun, right? Because it's not the vision is, I would say the blind example is a little extreme, but somebody, let's say, who is in the house, kind of depressed, doesn't want to get out, they're just like, oh, the world is too terrible, it's dangerous, it's like the weather is horrible, but they may never have gone out to notice that, oh, actually the weather is great. Because they've always been inside their house. They're just like this, they're too ignorant of the fact that there's beautiful weather outside. So let's say a friend comes to their house and drags them, pulls them out, and they just pull them out the door, and then they're like, oh wow, actually the weather outside is great. So, and when they experience it for themselves, that's when, like, all of their ideas drop. In the same way, this is kind of how this works as well. Any thoughts about this one? Okay. I think we may be able to finish the book. There's 3 more verses left. So 66. Shravanadi bhirudhyapta jnanagni paritapitah jiva sarva malan muktah sarvana vadhyottate swayam. So the jiva, on being heated in the fire of knowledge, kindled by listening to the scriptures and so on, becomes free from all impurities and shines by itself like gold. Nice. So this is again poetry, and you can imagine, and you can look at the jiva as our own self. So jiva is somebody who is identified by their body. So like who is an embodied one, who thinks that I am this limited body. This person is an ignorant person from the standpoint of being realized, right? Like they don't know who they are. They think they're the body. And I think I'm my body, right? Like we start from this place. And then we start and we come in contact with this, with some sacred path, something that works, and then we start this process. And what is this process? We are trying to light a fire. When you go camping, we need to light a fire because the sun is setting. What do? We need to start getting, kindling. And we start gathering, in this work, we start gathering some ideas that would be the source material for us to get inspired, for us to start this work, so that we can start to light the spark. So so we're listening to we're coming to this class, maybe you're doing your own practices. All of that is essentially not paying attention to the world, right? Because the world is infinitely diverse and we can get lost in the world. But we will never find truth in the world. We just did that in the previous words, which is the world will be definitely interesting. It will be useful. We may solve a bunch of problems, but we will never find truth there. Truth can only be found within. And only few things in the world point us to something within. Most of, I would say 99%, even maybe more, most of the things outside is asking us to pay attention to stuff. Very few things in this world tell us to pay attention to something within. So, we are lucky to have, started on this journey. So once we start paying attention to something within, the spark has been lit, because we realize that, if we start to feel blissful without any sort of external influence, we can start to see that, oh, it's the bliss is right here. And that seeking becomes stronger and stronger. So just you need a little spark to light the fire, but as the fire grows, and maybe you just fan it, because you don't need to spark it anymore, but just simple things like fanning it or blowing on it will start to spread the fire. And then, depending on how much wood there is, that much time it's going to take for the fire to kind of burn out, right? And the wood here is our own sort of vasanas and desires. I wouldn't say even desires, I would just say vasanas. So, the word vasana is an impression that's left in the unconscious, where I think that it has joy and misery producing properties. So, if something, and that's kind of how we build attachments, and that's kind of how we build aversions. So attachments and aversions are consequences of vasanas, and vasanas are consequences of ruminating on experiences that have happened. So if I'm thinking about, oh my God, 6 years ago, this person, was such an asshole or something, right? And I'm ruminating over that experience, and I'm building this idea or an image about this person in my head, that they are a terrible person, and it's getting stronger and stronger. So now, let's say that person, I meet them tomorrow, that entire energy of this person is terrible is going to come up. So that's the vasana, and I'm either going to feel a sense of aversion, and I'm going to feel some emotion or anger or whatever it is, right? So these are vasanas that hold our mind in place. And that's all we're trying to burn. We are only trying to get rid of these impressions, which are wrong understandings. They may have done something terrible, that's fine, but we don't want to hold on to any sort of, I would say, unresolved emotion or baggage or thing that will keep my mind in place. They did what it is, but it's in the past. They may have changed. They may become a completely different person. So we just meet people in the moment, in the now, and deal with whatever is coming up in the now. So if they're being terrible in the now, you deal with that. But you deal with that situation, whatever happens, and then you move on. There's no sort of ruminating and reliving experiences from the past, because that's how we build vasana. So, we talk about, mindfulness. This is the ultimate mindfulness, which is just being in the now all the time, and not living in sort of from memory and not living from past experiences. So this vasanas will keep coming up, because, when we feel, so vasana has most, I think we may have covered this. So vasana has two properties. One is it blinds us, makes us believe that we are a person. So that's like the veiling power, you can say. Like I don't know my self nature, so I forget that I am pure awareness. So right now, maybe in class, you can be like, oh yeah, I am aware. Like I am aware. I'm aware that I have a body. I'm aware that I have a mind. It's pretty clear. But in the heat of the moment, which basically means what? It means that the vasana has taken hold of me. In that moment, I forget who I am. And I believe that I am the body, or I believe that I am the person, or like the identity becomes like whatever the situation is, right? Like, so this vasana always has this property of it hides my true nature. I forget that I am Brahman, or I forget that I am this pure awareness. And then the second property is the projecting power, which means it on this, based on what this experience is. So like if I'm angry, I will project things onto the other person. So I will project that this person is a terrible person, or this person has joy producing properties, or this person has misery producing properties. So that's what vasana is doing. So whenever we can only sort of feel the effect of vasana. We can never know vasana while it's happening. Only after anger has arisen can we realize that, oh wow, I was so caught up in this experience. But while it's happening, we are blind. See that this is true in your moment-to-moment experiences when things happen. So all we are doing is we are trying to recognize that this has happened. And once we are in this, let's say we are angry, we can start to sort of recognize that, oh, we are angry, and like not throw the anger at the person. Instead, we can kind of see the anger for what it is, and then over time, it will like kind of dissolve. But the first aspect is always this awareness, right? We have to be aware that we are angry, and only then can we actually play with the anger and say, okay, do I want to throw the anger at this person, or do I want to keep it with me? That's a choice that we can make only after we have recognized that we are angry. But usually what happens is when we are angry, we don't even recognize we're angry. We just like throw it at the other person or whatever it is. So all we're doing in this work is burning this vasana, and we are sort of being free from it. And once we are free from all of our vasanas, this Brahman is easily available for perception, because there's nothing blocking it. So vasanas, you could say, are blocks in the mind. And all we're doing is like clearing these blocks by poking at it, and then it let's say it bursts, and it's like a balloon, right? So like we just poke at these balloons, and they disappear. And once that happens, we shine. We become free, and we just shine. And this shining, this Brahman, this awareness, this light, it's just available for perception all the time. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do a couple more. Hridakashodito hyatma bodhabhano tamoprahat sarvavyapi sarvadhari bhati bhasayate khilam. So the Atman, the sun of knowledge that rises in the heart space, destroys the darkness of ignorance, pervades and sustains all, shines by itself, and also makes everything shine. So what happens when the mind sees its own unreality and it kind of dissolves? We see that we are Atman, which is the self within us. And once that is perceived, heart space isn't like any particular location. It's just, the space of awareness, you could say, where, we always say love and compassion, all of that is in the heart. So that's where we're talking about, this place where there is love and compassion. So this knowledge that we are love and we are compassion, like that knowledge rises. And because we are paying attention to that and not paying attention to the world, you could say, where we think all of our problems are. We always try to find problems in the world, and we try to find excuses and reasons of why I'm feeling shitty is because of something happening externally. And once we find a place that within us, which is what we wanted all along, all of these like silly ideas, they just dissolve. Thinking that I am, smart or stupid, or, I'm successful, unsuccessful, all of these qualities which I have believed and subscribed to, they all fall, because you just realize how silly they were in the first place. And once we perceive this is the thing that pervades and sustains us. So like, why do we feel low energy? Why do we feel high energy? There's some practices that can happen where, because we stop wasting energy, you could say, on silly things. Right now, most of our energy is spent thinking about stuff, not really doing anything about it. It's just reliving past experiences or thinking about how things could be better and not really doing anything about it. And we know by science as well that the brain actually uses a lot of energy. It's like, like 3 or 4 times more energy than any other organ that we have. So thinking is itself a wastage of energy if it's not really doing anything, right? If you're not actually taking any action. So once we stop this thinking process, we'll just notice that our energy is just way more, because, you're not wasting it on silly things. So you could say in that way, we become a lot more energetic, alluding to what Steve was saying earlier. So, it pervades and sustains us all, because, without this consciousness, without this thing, there wouldn't be this subjective world for us. Shines by itself, and also makes everything shine. So, because everything is nothing but Brahman itself. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the last verse. Digdesha kalal adhyene peksha sarvagam chita dihanni atisukha niranjanam yasya vatmatirtham bhajate vinishkriyaha sa sarva vitsarva gato mrito bhavet. So one who renounces all activities, who is free of all the limitations of direction, space, and time, who worships or his or her own Atman, is present everywhere, which is the destroyer of heat and cold, which is stainless and eternal bliss, becomes all-knowing and all-pervading, and thereafter attains immortality. So, this is I would say, summary of our entire book. And so let's go through it. So one who renounces all activities. So here, when we say renounce, we just renounce the agency. We don't, like I was saying, we don't go around the world saying that I am doing this. It's more of realizing that this is being done, this activity is being done because, and why is it being done? Because of my past impressions. And the past impressions have led me to want to do this activity. The reason why I'm attending this class right now, it seems like an activity, is because of the past. Something led you and impelled you to come here on a Saturday morning, right? And it's not like you are doing it. It's like, it's just happening. And that's happened. Like, we can look at every experience in our life and see that that is true, where like the reason why we're doing it is because of some past activity or some past experience, and has created some impression in my mind, and I'm doing this right now. So you could say there's no free agency in that sense. The will is essentially, the past, and what was my guna. We learned the word, which was like my state of mind while I was doing the activity. If I was pretty rajasic, which is like, egoistic or like passionate or like desirous of happiness in that moment, then I will think that this activity is joy producing, and I will want to do it from like a standpoint of wanting something from it. If I'm, so we kind of went through all of that. So that's essentially what this is. So renounce the agency, and you don't renounce the action. We still do the activities because we cannot help ourselves, because the force of wanting to do the activity is very strong. So I want to go and smoke a cigarette, maybe. It's because the force of that is very strong. But see that it's happening because of the past. And over time, what's going to happen is we are going to complete our activities. So the force of all these desires will start to reduce, because we will start to own the bliss that may come out of the desire. So if I'm feeling very blissful when I finish this activity, I'm going to own it, because it's my bliss. It's not the activity. It's not the cigarette. It's not the hiking. It's not the dancing. It's me. So start to own all the activities, and rather the bliss of all the activities. And similarly, the misery as well. If something is miserable, something feels miserable, it's my mind. My mind has come into play. It's full of thoughts right now, and I'm miserable. When the mind is quiet, I'm blissful. Start to own both bliss and misery. The second part, who is free from all limitations of direction, space, and time. So what is bound? My body is bound. My mind is kind of bound, but I has no limitations. I exist both, in any direction. So up, down, left, right, everywhere, right? And in terms of space, like, where is it that this I is not there? Wherever I go, I'm going to be there. I move from, America, I go back to go to a different country, I'm still going to be there. So in terms of space, I'm everywhere, you could say. In time, is there any time where I was not there from my own subjective experience? No, I'm always there. So, that's so I'm free from these limitations of space-time. The body has time, the mind has time, but I has no time. And then, the one who worships their own Atman is, because I start to own the bliss, I start to worship this. Because, what do we worship in this world? A lot of people worship money. A lot of people worship certain experiences. And by worship, it just means that you have the sense of reverence to it. And why do we have a sense of reverence to something? Because we think, because it actually delivers, right? It delivers happiness, it delivers bliss. But once we realize the actual the true reason for bliss is Atman, then that becomes the place of worship, and this sense of like gratefulness and reverence, you can say. So we start to worship our own Atman. First we have to own our bliss. Once we realize that it's my own self, then we can start to realize that, oh, it's this self that is all blissful and all holy, and which is present everywhere, because this I is shining all the time. There's no moment where I is not there, which is destroyer of heat and cold. And this basically is kind of, the pair of opposites. So anything that is physical has boundaries, right? It has these two ends. So hot and cold are like the two ends of temperature. You could say, solid and gas are the two ends of like physical limitations. So there's always these sort of opposites. And that's destroyer, you could say, in the sense that you realize that you're not the physical, so you're no longer bound by these physical limitations of stuff. So that's kind of what destroyer is, which is stainless, because, it has nothing but awareness in it. Remember, we spoke about purity. So pure is something that has only one substance in it. So pure water is only water. Atman is pure because it's nothing but just the Atman, or it's just the self, or it's just the I, or it's just the awareness. That's how we think of stainless. And it's eternal bliss because it's always there, and it's the source of bliss, you could say, because when the mind quietens down, the bliss shines. So if the mind is quiet all the time, we can be blissful all the time. And that's the kind of realization that happens, which is like we are bliss. And we becomes all-knowing, all-pervading is, the fact that, where is it that this knowledge comes from? Like, the I is responsible for knowing anything, right? It's the one that's responsible for objects to come into our awareness. And if we can pay attention to things, we can know things. That's the only way we can know anything, which is by paying attention. It's by perceiving something, and it's by fully paying attention to it. And because we have this ability now to focus on things, we can become all-knowing, where we can focus on anything and we can know about it. And it's all pervading because it extends everywhere. There's no place where I is not. And because of all of these things, where I is changeless, deathless, birthless, we become immortal. And it's not like we become immortal. We realize that we were never born. Something can only die if it was born. The I is never born. And that's the fruit of this work, which is we realize that, all of our suffering, all of our fears, all of them actually come from the fear of death. And in this, we kind of go beyond and we transcend our body. Because we transcend our body, we transcend death, because it's only the body which dies. But that's the last verse. Wow, we did it. And as is tradition in this work, we don't stop at the last verse. What we actually do is we read the first verse again. And what this signifies is that we are going to do our self-study, which is like, we have gone through the work. We've sort of gone through like what it means to understand this on some level, but there's definitely a lot more things that need to be understood, and we restart. So, it's a self-study. So let's do this first verse. Tapo bihi shina papanam shantanam vitaraginam mumukshunam apekshoyam Atmabodho vidhiyate. So I am composing this Atmabodha, the treatise on the self-knowledge, for those who have purified themselves by austerities, who are peaceful in heart, who are free from cravings and are desirous of liberation. Cool. So maybe now, like, this verse will make a little bit more sense, and what these different words were, and how to even go about reading this book. Cool. So we're done with the book. Any thoughts or questions about what we have done in the last verse or the verse before? Okay, no questions. We have 10 minutes left, so we can do a meditation set. All right, let me stop sharing. So let's get into a position where we can sit up straight. Just make sure your back is straight and erect. And your head is gently resting on your shoulders. Just start by taking a few breaths. And just looking at the breath. And realizing that you're always actually looking, and you're always aware of things that are happening. And you can be aware of both what you're looking at and the fact that you're aware. So I'm aware of my breath right now, but I'm also aware that I'm aware. So we can direct our attention to both these things. So if we move our attention from the breath, and we can move it to a more subtler level. So maybe we can just notice how we are feeling emotionally right now. Am I feeling joyful? I'm feeling sad, feeling energetic, feeling low energy. But even then, while I'm noticing that, I can still be aware that I'm aware. Like in the background, this can kind of simultaneously happen. So we want a part of our mind to always be engaged in this noticing, you can say, noticing that I'm aware. And we call this method, we call this self-remembering, where we are remembering that I'm aware. We are remembering this I, you can say. This I, and we don't even have to create a thought. We just have to feel that we are aware, that yes, I'm aware, and I'm aware of whatever I'm paying attention to. So I'm paying attention to how I'm feeling right now. So I'm feeling pretty happy. So I'm aware that is happiness, but I'm also feeling that I'm aware as well. So both these things are happening simultaneously. Now we can go a little bit more subtler. We can go to the level of thoughts. So I'm thinking of what I'm going to do after class this morning, but I'm also aware that I am. This eye is shining. So no matter at what level we are paying attention to, be it the physical world, be it the mental world, we want to self-remember. Pay attention to this I, partially pay attention to this I, and partially pay attention to the world. Slowly bring your attention back. Let's end this meditation by doing our chant. Yogarato va, bhogarato va, yogarato va, bhogarato va, sangarato va, sangavihina, sangarato va, sangavihina. Yasya brahmani ramate chittam, yasya brahmani ramate chittam, nandati nandati nandatyeva, nandati nandati nandatyeva, nandati nandati nandatyeva. So one last time. So the translation of this verse is the entire teaching of yoga, which is let one revel in yoga, or let one revel in bhoga, or which is satisfying pleasures or desires. Let one seek enjoyment in company or in solitude. She whose mind revels in the self, she enjoys indeed, only she enjoys. So that's the end of this chorus, I could say. I had a blast doing this. I hope this was useful, and I hope this inspires you to continue on this path and do the work, because I think in the end we have to do our own work. Nobody is going to give us self-realization, and nobody can give it to us. No matter what anybody tells you in this world, nobody can give it to you. You have to get it yourself. And how much attention and energy we put into this work, that's how much we're gonna, we are all, I guess, moving in this direction anyways, but how much attention we put into it is going to make it that much faster. So I hope this is a possibility for you and me and everyone else, and keep on keeping on. It was so much fun to have you all in the class. I'm happy to stick around and talk about anything, but that's the end.
Thanks, Praneet. This was a really great class. This was a fantastic intro.